Hello everyone, welcome to the Einstein Analytics Studio dashboard video. I'm going to be creating a three-part video for making a dashboard from the beginning to the end in Einstein Analytics Studio. The first video is going to be focusing on data flows, which is where you extract the information from Salesforce, manipulate it, and then save it into a data set within Einstein Analytics. The second video will get a little bit more into creating the widgets within the dashboard itself. And finally, the third video will get into a couple of advanced concepts such as static binding and results binding. Now, this is just a supplemental video. It's not going to go into too much detail on any of these subjects. It's really meant to be a reference for those who have had at least some kind of exposure or training. You really do want to get into training or a tutor or find someone who can help you with this if you can, because when you're learning from somebody, it's really just going to accelerate your understanding. And this isn't just for Einstein, it's for just about any subject, whether it's JavaScript programming, C# programming, or even things outside of IT. So I highly recommend getting into some training, and this video is hopefully just going to be a good reference. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be recreating this dashboard you see in front of me, which requires doing all of the main components of the dashboard creation. And I think if you can make this dashboard on your own, you'll have a pretty good foundation. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do first is we're going to go to the Einstein Analytics Studio and review the navigation really quick. So within Einstein Analytics Studio, you have a few main components that you really want to focus on. You're going to have apps, which are essentially folders that's going to hold components themselves. And this is where I like to actually do the security within Einstein Studio. Is what I'll typically do is put the dashboards and data sets that I want for a particular group of users all into the same app. And then it's very clear and easy to understand who can and cannot get to those. So inside of apps, you have dashboards, which are just factual cool things that people want to look at and use. And then you have data sets over here, which are ultimately, those are what the data source is for those dashboards. We're not going to get into stories, that's for Einstein Discovery. And lenses are essentially just exploring the data sets very quickly and ad hoc. So now the first thing I'm going to have to do to start my dashboard is get into that data flow so I can create that data set. And you do this using the data manager. So you get to the data manager by clicking on this gear icon on the top right and click on data manager. You're going to be brought to just a couple of screens here. There's not a lot going on. You've got the monitor screen where you can monitor your data flows, and then your data flows and recipes is where you're going to create the architecture for extracting that information from Salesforce. Recipes are basically miniature data flows that are user-friendly for some other business users. I like to stick with data flows if we can. So with data flows, that's where a lot of the main action is going to happen. So let's go ahead and create a data flow. Now, when you're naming a data flow, it's generally good to give it a title that represents what it's doing, such as opportunities data flow. Now, if you have a lot of people in your organization, you're going to want to talk about this naming convention just to come up with a strategy, because this is not the best name to be giving it. This is just for a demonstration purpose. All right, now this might be a little bit intimidating at first. You'll see a big blank screen in front of you and not be sure what button to click. Just remember, this is an extract, transform, and load tool. That's exactly what a data flow does. And so you're going to have these little nodes up on the top. And this SFDC digest node is the extract node. It is an extract node. And it's the one node you're going to want to use for extracting information from Salesforce. These other ones over here, a lot of them are for manipulating the data, that's transforming it. And finally, loading the data comes with this one over here, SFDC register. So before I start putting objects on the screen, little purple blocks and nodes, I need to make sure I understand what objects I need to work with in order to recreate this dashboard. I see that I have opportunities by account name and owner. So I know that I need the opportunity object from Salesforce. And in order to get the account name and the opportunity owner, you might think that you could, just use that one object for the whole dashboard. However, opportunity owner is actually a user object in Salesforce, and the account name is actually stored on the account object in Salesforce. And so understanding the behind-the-scenes architecture of Salesforce will give you some help when it comes to designing these data flows, because I can't just grab the account name or the opportunity owner's name from the opportunity unless somebody made a field on the opportunity itself that happens to have those, but that's not a good design. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling those three objects using these SFDC digest node. Call this SFDC digest opportunities. And I'm going to search for the opportunity object. And then I'm going to select the fields that I want to work with. I want the account ID so that I can join it to the account. I want the amount, close date, expected revenue, maybe the forecast category. I'm going to need the ID of the opportunity in order for me to do that cool feature that you saw me do, where you can click on the row and say open the record in Salesforce. I'm going to want the name. The owner ID will let me join to the owner. And then stage name. That should do it. Okay, now I need to grab my account object. This is where I'm going to find the name of the account. I want the ID and the name. Finally, I want the owners. That's actually going to be stored in the user object within Salesforce. And from here, I can go ahead and press the create button, and now I've got my three SFDC digest registration nodes and the fields that I want on my dashboard. So now I've got to start joining these together so that I can get that account name and the opportunity owner name into one little data table. At the very end, when you register this, you're essentially just going to get one table of data, and that's what you want to work with on your dashboard. So now I need to augment these together. So I'm going to use an augment node. That's where you're joining the two together. So we'll call this augment opportunities to accounts. An important thing for me to call out here is that when you're doing augments, you're generally going to want to come from the child object, which in this case is the opportunities. And what I mean by that is one account can have many opportunities, but one opportunity can only have one account. And so in my dashboard, if I want one row for every opportunity in my grid, or for every set of, every record in a chart to represent one opportunity, I'm going to need to come from that child record and then move up to the parent. You'll see this when we get to the dashboard section, but so I'm going to go ahead and select the opportunities as my left data source and then join it to the accounts as my right. The key is going to be account ID, relationship, the opportunities to account, and this is going to show up when you're working with the fields in the dashboard, so this is a friendly name to give it. Right source, count. Join it on the ID as the key. And then I want the name so that I can work with the name in my data set. Only look up one value. There's no reason why it should match with more anyway, but we'll leave it at that. If you were coming from the accounts to the opportunities and you had this selected, you would only get whichever one happened to match first, which isn't what you want. All right, now let's join to the user. We'll start with my augment node because I want the source of this transformation to start from where the other transformation left off. Use owner ID as the left key. And then we'll join it to the user. The key is just the ID of the user, and the field I want is the name. Look up single value and create. So here you can kind of see the transformation progressing from left to right. And you can do all kinds of things in between the beginning and the end. But at the end of the day, this is just meant to be a visual representation of what you want the software to do to the data as it extracts it and as it transforms it into Einstein Studio. Sorry, Analytics Studio. All right, now I'm done with my joining. Now I just want to register it. Grab the last one. We'll call this one actually a simple opportunity data set. We're not going to get into security. Like I said, I prefer to generally just do security by the app. You can get into it a bit more in terms of on the record level on your dashboards, but from a lot of times what I've seen is generally when someone sees a dashboard, they want to see it just how everyone else would see it. These are generally going to be more executive business intelligence dashboards. All right, and now I've got my registration here. There's a lot of other things that you can get into, like filtering these. Maybe you want to filter out all of one business unit before registering it. I've seen it where you can basically, right before you register it, filter it into 3 different business units, register them into 3 different data sets, and then let those business units work with their data without seeing the other business units' data. All right, so now we're going to update the data flow. We're going to run the data flow. You can see it's running. This little monitoring tab is where you're going to basically see if it ran successfully or it failed. If it fails, you need to take some action. For example, this failed a little while back, and what I had to do to fix that, where it said, hey, I couldn't grab anything from the replication repository, is I had to go to the Connect object, or sorry, the Connect tab, and then run a full data sync on the object that I wanted. This little Connect tab is where you're going to work with the replication, synchronizing the data between Salesforce and a repository that Einstein Analytics Studio has access to. Let's check the tab. Okay, my data flow is done running. It took 28 seconds. That's perfect. Anything that runs under 2 minutes is generally considered a free run, where it doesn't count toward your limit per 24 hours. So we're going to go ahead and now find that data set. By default, all of your data sets that you make in a data flow are going to fall into the shared app. And so I don't want it to stay in the shared app. I want to go secure it within its own little folder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new app. I can put this data set in. So go to Apps, Create a blank app. Simple dashboard demo app. Now that I have an app, I can move this data set that was just created into that new app by clicking this pencil icon right here. And just like that, now every time this data flow runs, it's going to refresh that data set and keep it inside of the Simple Dashboard Demo app. And now security is going to be based off of who can get to this app. And so if you actually wanted to share it with other people, you could share it through here. But that's one easy way to separate security between dashboards and components within Einstein Studio, is just by creating apps which are like folders and then securing those. So that's all we have for this video. This is part 1 of a 3-part video series. In part 2, we're going to actually go into start creating the dashboard, and we're going to take that data set that we just registered, and then we're going to put some simple widgets onto a dashboard. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.